Hey, hey, hey! Welcome! Welcome to the office hours, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get to the office real quick while we just begin our discussion. Happy New Year to you all. I got my hair cut finally. Oh, I feel so much lighter. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. How you guys doing? Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Julio, Kilifron, Macton. I see you there, Algrid. Let's see. Ashhole, Diabolus, Hack, Phantom. Saw at least one comment earlier. Tinbot, Turnbot, and Andre. Welcome, guys. Welcome. So, welcome. This is a little earlier because it's New Year's Eve for me in Texas. So, by the time this is over with, which is 8 o'clock by time, which would be 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific. Well, you know, normally when we'd be starting, that's when we'd be ending, basically. Hey, Benjamin Buford, how you doing, buddy? Y'all aren't angry, but with YouTube, what I've been doing for those of you guys who are watching this on YouTube and watching this right now, the plan that I do, the thing I do is I start the streaming on Twitch earlier because Twitch takes about 10 minutes for its API to kick in, and then I start the YouTube stream after that. Specifically because the YouTube stream ends up becoming an upload to YouTube, so that you guys who are watching this on YouTube right now don't have to go through like the 10 minutes of music introduction. So move everything around. The link real quickly. You guys want to retweet the spread the love? Here you guys go. There's the Twitter out there. Welcome, Pompano. So, Happy New Year to you all. Happy 2951 for those of you who are already on that side of the planet. To quote the Belter, even our sense of time comes from them. In Yeloda. And there's a lot of discussions about time that'd be interested. But I've got Algrid in chat on Twitch, so we can talk about this maybe. Sometime this year, I want to do kind of like a monthly podcast. Maybe live, maybe not. We'll see if we can do it. On lore, and just talk about lore and bring people on to talk about lore. One of the things I want to do, so it's going to be like a long form, more free form discussion. Like one of the things I was thinking about today was metaphor and historical metaphor that they like to use, that CIG likes to use in lore. For instance, there's a dual metaphor that's going on with the Tavaran. The Tavaran are both the Carthaginians in ancient Rome, and the Gauls, of course, the conquered peoples of Rome, the people whom Rome had conquered and then absorbed into the empire. But they're also, because of that, they also stand out as indigenous peoples who had been colonized. The colonialism, people who were at the receiving end of colonialism. And I realize that there's like, CIG could inelegantly stumble through that metaphor pretty hard in some cases I don't think they will, but that may be also one of the reasons why we don't see a Tavaran and why we don't have Tavaran like active in the game yet, because they're trying to take some more time with it. But that'd be an interesting discussion, the parallels between the colonization, the colonialism and imperialism that brought the Tavaran to its knees, and of course it's metaphors. Because science fiction, all good science fiction, I say not all good science fiction, a lot of good science fiction are allegories are parallels, are trying to comment on modern society. Whether they always mean it or not. In some cases, very overtly, like Star Trek. But, you know, sometimes you have commentaries through things like Star Wars. A lot of people don't know that Star Wars originally was a commentary, a political commentary, that was wrapped up in World War II nostalgia, but in reality was commenting on the Vietnam War, with the rebellion being a science fiction recreation of the Viet Cong, and the Empire being America. That isn't some sort of like crazy theory either. That's quite literally what George Lucas talked about. And of course, the new trilogy being a commentary on conservatism and the rise of conservatism in America, and lead up to things like George Bush's presidency and so on and so forth. That is also something that George Lucas has been very overt about. So whether you agree with it or not, there's a lot of stuff to be talked about. And so there's a lot of historical parallels to be discussed as well in the lore, as well as storytelling. So you think there'll be a new sheep release this month? Probably. We'll see. We know that there's going to be. Well, no. I'll take it back. No, I don't think we'll see a new ship this month. We'll talk about the progress tracker in a bit, but Merry New Year, Happy New Year, Happy Traveler's Day. Well, that's tomorrow technically, but we're going to talk about the Rust Society soon. I have to go through the Rust Society and kind of do some legwork. There's a good reading of the Rust Society lore by why am I blanking on her name? She's one of the co-creators and like I think the editor for Board Gamer. She did one on Board Gamer's channel. We'll take a look at it probably this month or so. But yeah, I don't think there's going to be one. Hey, Byron, how you doing, buddy? Because they're just stealthy, yes. Tevarin are very stealthy. Xenia, thank you, yeah. I watch Board sparingly. I like to support them when I can, but I got my hair cut because I got tired of having a bush under my head. It was funny because I went to go get my hair cut and the barber was like, I swear I keep cutting, but it feels like it's growing back. You've just got that much hair. And I'm like, I haven't cut my hair in 6 months. Yes, there's a lot of hair. Yeah, I was going to talk to you, Algrid, about that, so we can sit there and talk about it, because Algrid is unique in the sense that I'm sure he has a lot more exposure to Indigenous history than I do as a teacher, and I know that's not necessarily your area of expertise, but you probably have more direct experience with that, with things like Indigenous cultures and the Aboriginals cultures of New Zealand and Australia. And I think those are good parallels to Tevarin, is how, as well as, modern, as well as the native inhabitants of the United States, Canada, Mexico, and their kind of the various ways that historically has happened to them. So, but also talk about things like the historical parallels of the Xi'an as the ancient Chinese, and how the historical parallels of the ancient Chinese and the highly advanced ancient Chinese, who were more advanced than most of their Western peers for all of human history up until the 15th, 16th centuries, when things started to turn. And that's a whole nother discussion. That's a historical topic that I actually teach about on a regular basis, talking about the Ming Dynasty's implosion, as it were. But that's a good example, a good discussion as well, because of the whole Roman era and that kind of stuff. Talking about how the Xi'an are really highly advanced in Star Citizen, and the reason why they're so highly advanced is because they're based off of a time period in human history when the Chinese were not just the forefront of technology, but technologically superior in everything. Culturally and technologically superior, culturally in their region, but most technology was being developed by the Chinese and then exported to the rest of the world. Things like paper, gunpowder, writing, well, not writing, but bookkeeping and that kind of stuff. Even the book, in many ways. Well, that's a little bit difficult. I don't know if the book was exported to the United States, to the West from China. I wouldn't be surprised, because for most of Western history, they were using scrolls. So, Gunpowder. Thank you, Sci-Fi, for that 20 months. Duo Mori face battle face? I don't know what that means. No, Alabama. You can not watch me if that bothers you. Paper Money? Yeah, Paper Money is a good one. Yeah, there's a YouTube chat that I don't have up there yet because it's funky. I wouldn't be surprised, but I wouldn't be surprised if the first codexes that were being created, because I believe the original name in the West was a codex compared to a scroll. And wouldn't be surprised if they were copied from law books from, say, like Persia, which would probably... Well, it could have developed in Persia, but it could also have been copied from China. There's a whole discussion about papyrus. I come from a family that, like... My grandfather helped run a company, like a regional, I don't know if he's a regional manager, maybe just a plant manager for a paper industry. He worked his entire life. My aunt was an HR hiring headhunter for the paper industry. My dad worked as a chemical engineer for the paper industry for a while. So paper is kind of was kind of, at least my immediate family's forte. So I know at least a little bit about pulp and paper making in the history of it, in the sense that papyrus was used for things like scrolls. And the reason why it was used for scrolls is because you had to weave papyrus in together, and it was just easier to weave it in a longer sheet than it was to cut it up into individual sheets and then bind them together. At least partially the reason why. Stuff's still funky. I'm glad. Oh, Maori, yeah. The native New Zealand inhabitants. Do that battle dance? They're awesome. I'd love to. I would probably have no understanding of how the Maori do their war dances, but I've always been fascinated by the history behind that and the cultural significance behind them. I think, from what I can gather, because I've seen a lot of Maori and Peloponnesian, not Peloponnesian, that's completely different, Polynesian and Polynesian cultures. They kind of do those dances for luck and as part of kind of like a cultural ritual, similar to, I wouldn't even say prayer, more of just like kind of a tradition, I'd like to learn more about that, though, for sure. I'd also like to see stuff like that incorporated into human cultures in the 29th and in the 30th century in Star Citizen, as well as, other aspects of that into the more of the alien cultures to make them more human. If that makes sense. I have a big fucking family there, Maker. I have a huge family. The family business was my dad. My dad started off as an electrical engineer when he was a kid. And when I mean he was a teenager when he did electrical engineering. He also did some mechanical, not electrical engineering necessarily. He was like an electrician, and he did some electrician work as well as some basic design work. We're talking like, can we figure out how to make reverse engineer something that worked for a car and rebuild it and build it more efficiently. As well as some mechanic stuff. And then he went to college for chemical engineering, ended up hating it, and got a degree, specifically because he was going to get a chemical engineering to be environmental protection, because he wanted to get into the burgeoning environmental movement of the 60s and 70s. He was very interested in that. And then he got super depressed about it because, as my father likes to say, this story tells the story, is that he used to be the environmental manager at the plant that my grandfather was working, and whenever there was an increase of oxygen, because oxygen is one of the byproducts of making paper, when they would over-oxidate the river that they had the flow out of, because you can dump oxygen into the atmosphere. It isn't really that bad. But I think it's something like water is like higher oxygen levels in the water than there should be. Like it's poisonous levels. That if they put too much of that into the river, it would kill all the fish. And kill all the animals in the water. It would require that very balanced ecosystem. And he said, like, what happened, he thought his job was to protect the environment, but it ended up being, essentially, whenever there's a spillage or an accident like that, he would just be given a boat and a net and told to go fish up all the dead fish before the environmental folks showed up to investigations. He ended up just covering up environmental spills. He was like, I don't want to fucking do this. So I ended up going into marketing. Much more ethical. I guess I figured if the world's already fucked, I might as well make some money off of it. Making them more human to make them more relatable and stuff. We gotta one reason it's truly alien to the verse. I feel like it's also kind of a sci-fi trope to have aliens which are kind of human. All right, White Wolf. Well, question: the Talon Shrike was developed for the Second Tevarin War with the help of the Xi'an. Why would they build a missile boat rather than a bomber? From what I know, they were used as quick strike craft. Wouldn't a light bomber be better suited for that role? Just wouldn't that role also be given the Tevarin War doctrine? Okay, so they also redid the lore a little bit. The Talon was actually developed in the First Tevarin War as a bomber, but it was replaced. The Shrike was. I'm sorry. The Talon was in the First War. The Shrike was also developed alongside as a quick refit, essentially, because originally the Talon was a escort fighter, and the Talon. Then the Tevarin started using it as the war dragged on to do ground strikes. And when they started doing ground strikes, they realized they needed to do more damage. So then they refit the Talon to have more missiles and created the Shrike. Then during the Second Tevarin War, the Shrike actually became the main battle, replaced the Talon altogether, because humans had developed shield technology derived from the Tevarin, specifically to overwhelm shields. So the idea of the Tevarin Shrike was, in the Second Tevarin War, was just Macross missile massacre. You're not going to stop all the missiles at once, especially from a squadron of Talons coming at you. So it was designed to overload shields of larger ships and smaller ships and then take them out with smaller guns. Or to do ground attack, especially since ground attack and raiding was much more of a staple of the Second Tevarin War than the First, given the mobile nature of the Tevarin fleet. And you also got to remember that Second Tevarin War, the Tevarin didn't have any static defenses. They also had no static supply lines. How they stayed, they didn't even conquer anything. They just raided. So Tevarin show up in one system, declare that they're going to reconquer their home system, and then just proceed to pillage and raid for years across many star systems, just taking what they need to survive. And as a result, you're not going to develop a bomber because you don't have the facilities to build a bomber. You're just going to use what you know. And so that became more important over the time. It just needs drives the devil's must sort of situation. Oh, I should probably, turn on the actual bot for y'all in Twitch. I need to get a bot for YouTube as well. Bunker Buster, yeah. Lord Tevarin appeared in Fora from an unknown jump point. Problem is, the jump point in that system were accounted for by the lore. That's probably one of two things. There's a lot of we didn't think about that because CIG is building the lore from big to small strokes, and sometimes those big strokes hit very specific details that need to change. So if they arrived from Fora, I'd have to do more in-depth research for it. It's likely they arrived from an unknown jump point in the sense that they've never discovered the jump point yet. Like, even humanity hasn't discovered the jump point yet. They just probably just showed up there, and so they assumed that they showed up from an unknown jump point. Though there's likely they'll probably just change the arrival point for somewhere else, because when they arrived in Fora in the Second Tavaran War, that we're talking like first couple of years, like maybe a year or two into development of Star Citizen, so they changed the map, the star map. They built out the star map in like the first couple of years, and then they had to completely change it because the star map they developed also had systems which weren't supposed to be for players who weren't supposed to be found until later by players, and the map was leaked to the player base, so they had to remake the entire map and then rediscover and reconstruct it. So some of those details may have been dropped off. Do I have an inside source for lore? No. All of the lore that I look at from the reading of the lore. And or I go to like the wiki, which is the tools wiki, does a pretty good job of sourcing a lot of its stuff, finding the sources from their sources, which is almost always from the website or from a comment. A lot of it's from the writer's guides, a lot of it is from the other kind of stuff, but wiki. Yep. What do the Tavaran think about human tech? Do they use future Twitter to tweet? I get what you're saying, because they're birds. Honestly, they don't care. The Tavaran really... I mean, the modern Tavaran give no craps about human technology. They'll use whatever technology that works. The thing that Tavaran really had over humanity during the First and Second Tavaran War was shield tech, but it was more miniaturization of shield tech and things like stealth. Yeah, future Twitter is Spectrum. For those of you guys who don't know, Spectrum is both the website upon which you can discuss things about Star Citizen, everything, and also the in-game internet. So, how to best explain this? Spectrum is kind of like the net of cyberpunk or the internet of modern day, but it's more than that. You also have television programs on Spectrum. You have communication on Spectrum, as well as you have social media and like all sorts of things. So they'll say things like, you'll see ads for shows that are live on Spectrum at this time period. So as far as I can understand, there is a part of Spectrum which is essentially like all media is now live streaming, essentially. No longer is it broadcast in the traditional sense, but it is still being broadcast in that even popular media shows in the Star Citizen universe are broadcast to Spectrum via you know what? I might actually buy some fucking makeup because these lights. They don't know I'm shiny as hell. If I actually put powder on my face, I might actually, be less shiny. Less. As I hit my mic. Just noticing that. But no, so they actually broadcast television, essentially style in the future. It's just on Spectrum. Like a docile Skyneck. Basically, yeah. It is possible to work out a lot of the chronology from the lore provided by CIG. I pieced together a fair bit. Spectrum is also integrated into the game now. Oh, is it now? I didn't know if it was or not. HoloNet. I don't think they call it the HoloNet, but thank you, Doctor. For those of you who don't know, let me pull up the meme. I made a meme that I've actually scheduled because I figured it'd be mean to. I had it up and then I pulled it down because I figured it would be mean to try to bother CIG and like rub salt into the wound because I know that they really wanted to release it and then ended up didn't. But I made a meme that I have scheduled to release on Twitter the first week they're back to get on them about it. But this is Xenothreat now, guys. After 2 years of demand of broadcasting people of Stanton to right a great injustice. This is what you've done to them, CIG. This is you, CIG. This is your fault. Oh, as an analogy, yeah. Yes, and right when they come out, no. Let's talk about the animals first because I think that's the thumbnail on YouTube, and I'm sure people want to know more about that. Let me make sure I have everything set up properly. Hold on. All right, pull up my information real quick, which is just the Galactipedia. Yeah, also the Galactipedia is a thing. For those of you wondering where I get a lot of my sources, Galactipedia is sometimes better than the than the wiki because it has a lot of information, including a timeline and everything. They even have a trending tab. All right, animals, there we go. So there's only 4 animals they have on here, but the Xiphopods / blind Oni crab, we'll talk about that first. Well, first off, let's talk about like the animals themselves. Like how do the animals function, that kind of stuff. Hey, Vecna. The floaty brain thingy. Sandworm hunting. Listen, I will learn to ride the sandworm. I will. I'm not saying I'm the chosen one. I'm just heavily implying it. Having fun, I mean? Yes, it is illegal. Having fun is illegal. So, blind Oni crabs. So, they come from Lear 1. They're found on worlds with hot grassland environments, but have also been known to be highly adaptable in extreme conditions. They're considered an invasive species in the UAE, with their ability to float and propel themselves through the air has made them a favorite subject of xenobiologists. Discovered during the initial planetary survey of Lear 1, several specimens were captured and delivered to the University of Redder. In fact, let me pull up the presentation so you can see it. For study and classification. The scientists named the species Xiphopod in honor of its resemblance to the animals of the phylum Arthropodia and genus Xiphosuria. The surveyors who discovered the animal, inspired by the face and nose that can be discerned by the animal's front carapace, were responsible for the more common name of blind Oni crab. So if you look at the blind Oni crab, you can see that this is its face right here. And it's got some nasty looking chompers right there, but there is no eyes, which is why they call it the blind, a blind crab. It also has kind of crab-like tendencies and a carapace on it, so crab makes sense. And for those of you guys who don't know, oni, I believe, if I remember correctly, and if the people who knows Japanese, if anyone who's in comments or in chat knows Japanese, let me know. Oni is actually a type of demon in Japanese mythology, and there's kind of a style of even kind of dress, which is kind of known as oni or something like that. So, you know, it might be, definitely the thing looks demonic, so I wouldn't be surprised. And there's a lot of Japanese culture in Star Citizen's universe. I'd like to see more different human cultures impacted, but Japan is one of those very well represented cultures, and Japanese and Chinese cultures generally in Star Citizen lore. So I wouldn't be surprised if the surveyors were from, say, what am I blanking on it? Centauri, the Centauri system, which is where Saisei is, which is where Misk is from, as well as Tumbril are both from Saisei. I have a feeling that in reality, what Saisei is going to end up being heavily Japanese with French accents, or French accents, and it makes me go, can we please have a Jules Pierre Mao? I know that's Chinese, but like in Star Citizen, where you see that kind of blending of cultures. Little big Japanese planet, yeah. Anyways, let's go through this. So Xiphopods are found naturally in Layer 1 in hot, warming grasslands near sea level, their native environments. They spend time hunting, scavenging food, and resting. Xiphopods spend part of the year in groups and then split off to travel hundreds of kilometers to join other groups during mating season. So the blind oni crabs, or the Xiphopods, I'm just going to call them oni crabs. The oni crabs will stay in one group and then travel to another group to mate, and then travel to other groups. So they just constantly travel individually to various groups. So they live in herds and then break off during mating season to go find other locations. This helps prevent them from inbreeding, because they're always moving and scattering off to the winds to try to find other groups or to form other groups for mating. Which just says here, biologists theorize this behavior is developed to ensure genetic diversity in the species. Their unique flight pattern occurs via biological process. The Xiphopod converts surrounding air, breaks down the air into hydrogen-helium mix and circulates it within its large hollow cavity. This allows it to float. So these things actually fly. It then propels itself through the air by expelling gas from its body, which is incredibly light compared to its size. The most heavyweight adult Xiphopod ever weighed was only 10.58 ounces, or 300 grams. Very, very light. And that's the heaviest to date. Now, here's the problem about Xiphopods using helium and hydrogen. What happens when you hit something that has a lot of hydrogen gas in it with an explosive, or like a very hot laser? What do you think is going to happen? Boom. Oh, the humanity. So you can imagine that blind oni crabs are kind of hard to deal with. They're an invasive species all over the place. So they lay up to, according to this, up to 1,000 eggs at a time. And when you hit one in a pod of a bunch of other ones, you start a chain reaction. You've got, like hundreds of little mini Hindenburgs going on. With, trying to fix something. Hold on. Yeah. I'm very tiny. I'm very big. Oh, I'm trying to fix my camera because I realized I was... There we go. A little better. There we go. Anyways, so yeah, basically, mini Hindenburgs going off at once. Hey, Wade. Yeah, exactly. Explode. And someone asked you, can you eat them? I wouldn't be surprised if you could eat them. It would not surprise me if you could eat them. So, they're one of my favorite species, because one of their not natural habitats, one of the habitats they've entirely taken over is Hurston. Oh yeah. Also, they lay 1,000 eggs at a time, and then they hatch in 17 days. I think they only have 1 or 2 breeding periods a year, but though it feeds on a variety of food types, it thrives off of biological waste. The blind oni crabs are filled with hydrogen. They breed like rabbits, and they eat garbage. This is awesome. Beers got wiped, at the end. They should have been wiped. They might explode like that. But you're dealing with hydrogen explosion. Here, let me see if I can find a good video of this. Okay. Finding a good one for this. Anyways, hydrogen is much more combustible than most other elements. We're not talking about gas, which burns. Hydrogen explodes. So I could find something decent for it, but... Not in like a dramatic explosion. We're not talking something that's like... No, but they don't live in low oxygen atmospheres. Generally speaking, you're going to find blind oni crabs on hot, dry planets, like Hurston. Especially places like Hurston, which are covered in filth, which is their main source of sustenance. They eat biological waste. So... We're not talking a 1-to-1 necessarily, but we're talking a pretty close to that. It's a helium-hydrogen combination. Exactly. And here's the thing about blind oni crabs. They breed like rabbits, and they're an invasive species, and they're everywhere. So one of the things that I would expect to see for animals, especially when first implementation, is that I wouldn't be surprised if blind oni crabs make it in the first implementation of the game. And if they do, you will have missions to clear them out. Because you can imagine thousands of mini Hindenburgs trying to get into Lorville. That'd be bad, okay? Can you think about how many combustible things there are in Lorville alone? By the way, is my volume too bad or good and everything like that? Yeah, exactly. So hydrogen, essentially what I'm saying is, one of the missions you're going to have to do is go pop Oni crabs. Go watch Oni crabs explode. It could make it on fire. I don't know if that makes it improves with Lorville. With melee attacks. Yeah, so that's one of those. Linstick says, I didn't know. Think about space animals being in the game eventually. Yeah, it's one of the things they want to use to add to make the planets more diverse. And blind Oni crabs have been seen in early. Let me see if I can bring up the video of it. CitizenCon, I think it was 2017. Yeah, 2017. Okay, so this was Lorville. Back in the day, they've changed the tram a little bit. Let's see. This is from Board Gamer's channel, so I don't know if he has the full thing. This is from 2017 Gamescom. This is what the gates look like in Lorville. And yes, I know, it looks so much better. It's because it's a set piece. But this is where the first shot of the Xiphopods comes in. Boop! You can start seeing them. There is the blind Oni crabs. There's how they function. There's how they move. See them? So we know that the blind Oni crabs. Thank you, Board Gamer. You know that the blind Oni crabs are all over Hurston. And we know that they at least had some of the animations and some of the basic stuff into the game with the CitizenCon 2017. So they have a lot of information about them too. So I wouldn't be surprised if the first things we see are actually blind Oni crabs. They'll probably look different, yeah. But I just expect their design in general to be about the same. Fauna is, as far as I know, it's not on the progress tracker yet, because they haven't updated all of the teams that are doing the progress stuff yet. So we'll talk about that in a bit. But I wanted to kind of like bring this up first because this is one of the my favorite animal in Star Citizen. And then back to home. Let's look up another. Flow pets. Okay, so there's not a ton of stuff here, but let's go at the Leyland Tortoise. So not all animals in Star Citizen are alien. Leyland's tortoise is a species that was actually on, was actually in the endangered species list, and then survived because it's become super popular. Sci-fi and Indigenous 4 both have tortoises, so. Because tortoises are nearly extinct in the wild, it is illegal to own one that has been captured instead of captively bred. Any person with an UBE found with a wild-caught Leyland Tortoise in the possession is subject to arrest. So, Leyland Tortoise population in 2875, conservationists attempt to introduce the tortoise to low Coral 3. However, Banu residents of the planet consumed it at an unsustainable rate. The population did not take hold. Banu love them some turtle soup. So yeah, turtles. Turtles are in the game. You'll see them in the universe, just crawling around and set. So, like, and of course, for those who don't know, the Leyland Tortoise is apparently from, I don't know if this is true or not, is from the Amazon? Yeah, South American continent. And along the Andes Mountains and Central Rainforest. So. Yes, fauna would definitely be iCache/server meshing dependent. Much more likely iCache. It also is very much dependent, I'm guessing, on AI classifications. So there's much ado is being made about the economy and how the background economy functions in terms of a macro scale. But on a micro scale, what CIG is planning on doing is implementing individual AI interactions or profiles that then they can attach to various humans. So you would have profiles which I'm assuming would probably be randomly generated, like, this is a pirate, let's roll some dice. He is a coward who likes pips and is broke. You know, having some categories in terms of like personality type, background, all these sorts of things, which would then affect its trees of if-then kind of behaviors, which would then cause funny interactions, but stuff that would work. And that kind of stuff is important because on a micro scale, those quanta, as they will become basically, will also need to consume to impact the market. So those are the individual creations that CIG has to work on while they're making the background information. I'm assuming that at the same time, they have to take that information and then apply it to animals. It wouldn't be too much of a stretch. The problem about the animals, actually, in many ways, it would be easier because you can probably just set basic parameters for the animals. The hardest part is you can't just apply the same stock stuff to all the animals. You'll probably have to create things like herding behavior, belligerence, and that kind of stuff, which will have to be individual crafted. Yeah, exactly. Hey, Silver. I haven't heard anything about the insects. I haven't heard anything about the insects themselves. Birds, I am assuming, will probably be as well. But we'll see. Nav mesh. I think they have some nav mesh on there. I believe Leyland tortoises swim. I mean, you're talking about well, no, I don't. You might be able to see them. You can definitely see them on sci-fi, at least in the wild. Yes, if you pick up a tortoise, you will get arrested. You will be breaking. Stop! You've broken the law. You criminal scum. Let's pull up some of the other animals real quickly. Okay, so these are non Galactopedia stuff. So now we're gonna look at the Pyro crap. Now, there's been a much ado about the pyro crab, because the pyro crab, I have a feeling, will be the first introduction of animals in the universe. And I wouldn't be surprised if CIG is shooting to have the pyro crab be introduced into Pyro with Pyro being released. So, we don't know. Now, we don't know if it's sentient. We know that it lives on a planet in Pyro. It is bioluminescent. It has 4 legs and has flagellae. Now, I'm guessing that the flagellae on its face, I'm not a biologist, so I couldn't tell directly, but I'm assuming that those are probably some sort of sensory forces. A lot of those kind of flagellae you see on animals and insects and such usually help test things like air pressure and stuff. They can like help you determine if there's a predator nearby just by the change in air, the change in the environment around them. And they use that as that. They could also be, with CIG, they could just be giant fuck-off whips that'll just beat you to death with them. I don't know. CIG loves them some crabs, guys. They love the pyro crab. The pyro crab, and you can tell because they have talked about it frequently. Now, we know that they're a hive creature, and they're controlled by a queen. I don't know if that means that they are a gestalt, like a hive mind, where they have one entity kind of like controlling all of them. I'm assuming that it's something kind of like how ants work, or bees, where you have a leader hive, that controls the rest by pheromones or by other actions. So, i.e. low light, which would make sense, as well as that they're bioluminescent. So if they have those long feelers as well as bioluminescence, I wouldn't be surprised if they're mostly blind as well, if they mostly deal with low light. So again, this could be a situation where the best way to defeat a pyro crab is just shine a freaking light on it, because it might overwhelm its senses. So. Well, you can look at the OG space crab, the Defender, the one who'd win. Crab battle! Defenders versus pyro crabs. Thank you for that $10 there, Brandon. Haircut looks good, man. You just need to line up the beard. It's lined up. It's there. I just need to shave a little bit. And no, this is not dyed. This is my natural hair color. So I'm going gray from my temples around, and then you can see some gray tufts in here, but. Thank you for that $10, man. But they could also just attack anything that gets too close. Technique used by crocs. That's actually the technique that they've discussed about with the pyro crab, is that they're incredibly territorial and will just attack you if you get too close to them. So they're going to be awesome. Crab hunts will be a thing. I wouldn't be surprised if crab hunts are important, especially if you want to do settlements. Here's the thing. I'm fairly certain that with CIG trying to develop settlements, one of the things they're going to try to do is allow you to homestead in places like Pyro. And one of the things that will make homesteading in Pyro interesting is if you find a large resource like, I don't know, Hadnite or something like that, something that's valuable on a planet in Pyro that has an atmosphere, likely that those resources will also be controlled or be protected by pyro crabs or pirates. Because I wouldn't be surprised if in fiction these things are drawn to some sort of natural heating substance from the core of the planet, which would be similar to the deep ocean crabs use geothermal vents, and that these geothermic activity is where you find a lot of these resources. So you want to go set up a mining base, bring some crab hunters along because you're going to fight them.
To Béarnaise sauce. Yes. Happy New Year to you guys, yes. I saw in a video that different kinds of life forms strategically seem to have evolved into crab-like creatures over time, so I guess it makes sense to have that many kinds of space crabs. Yeah, crab is a very common form, so. I hope they're good at eat those pyro crabs. I 100% believe that. Bram, so thanks for that 28 months, by the way, my man. Get some. Yes! Crab battle with a knife.
We gonna gig some crabs. In Pyro, we deal with the pyro crabs the traditional Pyro way. You tie a knife to a stick and you scab it. You stab it to death. Yeah.
Get crab cage fights, maybe.
C2 full of tonks and a crab starfare full of butter. Yeah. Dude, yes. Giant kaiju battle. Giant crab versus mecha.
Railgun to the face.
Am I using a Hostess? Yes. Twin stick.
Cutting engines to barbecue it.
Take on a small vehicle? Yeah, I mean, like, let me pull up the picture again so you guys can see it. So this is just concept art, but based off of this scale, it's about maybe 5 times the size of a human. One of these things could probably crush an Ursa. It could probably also kill an Aurora or like an arrow. This thing is probably almost the same size as an arrow. At least, like, with this size. There could be bigger ones. They're also able to mimic themselves as rocks, so... Make some crab armor, yeah. Yeah, this is... I also wouldn't be surprised if one of the reasons why they wanted to bring the Tonk into the game is to have crab versus Tonk fights. Yeah, a couple people said it's talked about that in chat already, that crab is kind of generic, is a common evolutionary destination. So, Morrowind in space, yes. Defender and a pyro crab, yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, Max, if they wanted to make, after the Mandalorian, they make one of the legs go through the canopy. That would be cool as well. I didn't think about that. In the future, the idea of having animals, of being able to capture, like maybe some crazy... Maybe the Hurstons want a pyro crab so that they can put it in their zoo in the in Lorville, in the big Lorville building, their gold-plated zoo. And so they hire players to go capture pyro crabs and bring them to Lorville. So you'll have to figure out ways of stunning the creature and then dragging it with your tractor beams into a cargo hold and keeping it sedated. That'd be cool. There's lots of opportunities that open up with animal gameplay, other than just pest control and maybe even studying them. Kind of cool stuff. All right, so those are the big ones. The other one, which we don't have a picture of, is called the Ranta. It's been referenced several times, and if you've been into a cave and you picked up that sort of off-white stuff that's kind of, I think it's like a greenish off-white stuff. That's Ranta dung, which is Ranta poop. Now, Rantas, we don't have an image for them in game, but they're similar to a... They must have taken it down. Isopod. Thank you. There it is. From an isopod-like crustacean known as a Ranta. It has recently been discovered that the dung contains a unique bacterial biome that helps Ranta process and digest minerals. Some researchers are hopeful that this will lead to industrial or medical innovations. So, yeah, Rantas eat rocks. They literally eat minerals. And their dung is processed minerals. So. Cool YT search. Why do key things keep evolving into crabs? Person security crab. Give him a little hat. Who am I guessing? Who am I kidding? Of course, if you're gonna go capture a crab for the Hurstons, what it'll be is you get a crab so that you can they can throw their enemies into a crab pit. Battle for my amusement, peasant. Hurstons. Poo crystals, yeah. You already do poo mining, Max. You already do poo mining. If you picked up any Ranta dung, which is apparently about 40 AUEC a pop, Ranta dung is poo crystals. Are you at all worn out by doing the Star Citizen grind? Yeah, I take breaks every so often. I took large breaks in the fall. I'll probably take another break at the end of January. Like the in-between time between patches. The dock times of Star Citizen. But I don't, like, contrary to popular belief, I don't just do Star Citizen all the time. In fact, let me show you my most recent... One of the things I do for fun, outside of gaming and such, is I've started to do Warhammer stuff. So, this is a semi-custom Primaris Captain for the Space Marines. I've just assembled them. There's a little bit of a gap here that I have to fill in with green stuff, but, you know, it's a cool little mini. I got to paint him and stuff like that and prime him, but I got a bunch of this stuff for Christmas, so. And then this is a custom orc mini. Not a custom, I customized him, gave him a kill saw and everything. Boss knob. So, I do things like that. And I'm also currently playing through Cyberpunk. I haven't finished it yet, but I'm going through it. So I do a lot of stuff when I'm not doing Star Citizen stuff, and I don't do a lot of that stuff on the channel, partially because I found that most people who watch me for Star Citizen content, and I venture out so often. Like I did a bunch of lore videos on Cyberpunk, which did pretty well. People enjoyed it, and we'll do more content and streaming and stuff like that at some point. So. Yes. In fact, I'm not just going to paint them red so he can go faster. I'm creating an Evil Sun's mobile army for the orcs. But I've built an entire guard army. It's really hard for me to show this, but I have over 2,000 points of guard.
It's a lot of card. And I built it over the last 6 months. Primaries are a lot easier to build, and I got a bunch of them for gifts and such, so it wasn't too bad. I am a Redemptor Dreadnought away from finishing that army. I only started it 2 months ago. And again, to be fair, I bought a start collecting pack and that's about half the army. And then I bought like $120 worth of stuff from various other points, and then maybe $150 over the last 2 months. And then I got a bunch of stuff for Christmas. So, like, meh. So yeah. And for those of you who don't know the Warhammer lore, red makes them go faster is the Evil Sons. So I play a Warhammer 2 daily great lore. Nice, thank you. Ranta coffee would be an interesting one, yeah. The bird poop. I can see some mobile, small scale animal cage fight gambling in the cargo of a Connie. I wouldn't be surprised of it. So. +1 movement, no negatives to advance, and +2 movement, not just movement, +1 to movement, +1 to advance rolls, no negative to shooting with assault weapons if they move, and if you are speed freaks, which are like the bikers, then you get a +2 to your move in advance. It's +2 to your move in advance. So a biker, which I'm going to be building a bunch of knobs on bikes. So knobs on bikes will move 14 inches, but with Evil Sons, they move 16 inches. And then if that means at minimum, even if you would move and advance them, then they'll move at minimum 19 inches. And if you have a war boss on war bike, they have the ability called Speed Wah, which will give all of the any biking or speed freak, speed freak or vehicles, any bikes or vehicles within 6 inches of them can move, advance, and charge. I have played games online with the army that I've kind of been kind of customizing, where I'm in the enemy's lines in turn 1. If I go first, you're already in melee with me. It's pretty cool. Space cows, let's talk about them as well. So, the Quasi grazers. Let me look up the Quasi grazer real quickly. There we go. If yes, how do I buy NPC and when are they going to be useful? I don't know if you'll be able to buy NPCs in Star Citizen. They said at one point you'd be able to use your accounts as NPC characters, but we haven't heard anything since like 2013 about that. And considering CIG just spent, a couple of years selling unique names for ship hulls, and then it basically just said, bruh, it doesn't matter what the name is. We can't lock that name out. Then I don't know if that'll be held because it's just an idea. Anyways, welcome to the ugliest cow in the universe, the most disturbing cow in the universe. If you are, if you're squeamish, or just if you're squeamish, I would maybe walk away for a few minutes, because we're going to talk about the inner workings of the Quasi grazer. So the Quasi grazer
or I think it's Quasi, but they have weird pronunciations in the universe, so it's actually Quasi, is how it's pronounced, which is Quasi. Comes from the fields of Quasi on Terra, and their unusual method of carrying their young. So Quasis are mammal-like creatures, what would be considered mammals, that have eggs. So the Quasi doesn't get milked necessarily. When you see this, these are its young. Those are eggs, as far as I can tell. So Quasis are used for eggs and for their meat. And their skins work really well for heavy winter clothing, and they're very adaptive to most terraformed planets. I'm assuming they're probably smaller than cows, or at least are less caloric requirement for cows, which is why they're preferred over cows in terms of terraforming. But essentially what happens is the UEE humans have basically kind of like a kit of species that they introduce to newly terraformed planets, because the process of terraforming, those are marsupials. Yeah. These are kangaroos on 4 legs that are cows. It could have mammary glands. That's true. It may not be a mammal then. It may be a reptile. I get Luke Skywalker PTSD. I don't know if there's I don't know if they produce milk at all. Mammary glands, yes, mammary glands. Mammary glands. I don't know. There's nothing in here about that. Anyways, so when you're producing a terraformed planet, you have to kill everything on the planet. Most terraformed planets are chosen to be terraformed because of their relative position in a green zone in terms of habitability. And even then, depending on how far away they are from the green zone, will require various different techniques to be used. It's complicated, and it's far from a definite science. It's not there's consistency, but each planet has to be treated a little bit differently, which is why terraforming is expensive and costly and not always worth it, because if you're dealing with a time-consuming, costly process that you then have to sell land on, it could be a gamble. People may not want to show up for it. Which is why, for instance, Stanton was in a pickle, because when the UEE terraformed Stanton, it was very expensive. They had an expensive military around there, and they couldn't sell the freaking land to anybody, which is why they sold it to the companies. So part of that package of terraformation, once they've terraformed the planet, they'll find animals and plants which will work well in those environments. Now, we're very soul-centric, Earth-centric, in the sense that we think, so human plants from Earth would be what they use. But we have found at least one, if not multiple, planets which are actually human-habitable without much terraformation required, including Terra. So much of the plants and the flora and fauna of planets that have been terraformed are a combination of various native species to other environments. So the Quasi grazer, also known as the space cow, exists because it is the main staple protein source for most of the Empire. As a result, any terraformed planet that exists in the Empire is going to have Quasi grazers on it, either wild or domesticated. So it's a cow-looking platypus. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if this was a cow-looking platypus. Yeah, then if things go wrong, it's all ice. See Microtech. Too far away from the sun, very edge of the green zone. They screwed up something, so it's not habitable, or it is habitable, just barely. It's like some kind of the Thing body snatchers, kind of parasitic. What are you talking about? Yeah, we do. We do know that there are natural species that live in planets like Banu worlds and Xi'an worlds. So there could also be some species or some animals that come from Banu or Xi'an worlds that have been introduced into the Empire as well. A good example of naturally occurring habitats are Lear. Much of the planets in the Lear system were actually naturally habitable and were not bothered to be terraformed because of that. So, do we get a? Oh snap! There's a 5. Let's get some beers in chat. Thank you so much for those 5 gift subs there, Cordath. You rock, my man. Shots and cheers. There were older advanced alien civs, e.g. the Hadesians. Yes. Now here's the problem about the Hadesians. They blew themselves up. There's nothing living on Hadesian worlds. Hadesian worlds, as far as I can gather, are not habitable. You have to have a spacesuit to go to the Hadesian worlds. One of the worlds of Hades was completely destroyed. It literally blew itself up. And all of the planets are completely shelled to oblivion. So there is nothing that lives in Hades. Nothing natural that lives. Sorry. I have to get some creepy stuff. I'm bringing back... Nobody watched the freaking Mysteryverse stuff I did on Day of the Vara, but I'm still bringing it back. I'm going to do the mystery series of Star Citizen lore. They never made it out of their home system, as far as we know. The Hadesians did not know. The parasite that took over people was actually a movie, not an actual creature in Star Citizen. If you've seen the infected helmet with like the little eyeball that's out of there, like that hangs out, that is actually a movie prop in the universe. Yeah, it's the haunted planet. So we're actually eating Quasi burgers? Yes, you're eating Quasi burgers. When you're having those burgers at Microtech, I can't remember the name of the burger company. Then yes, you are having Quasi burgers. So this leaves us with the last couple of ones, which are not really. Let me see if we can get to this. Star Citizen. I don't think I've seen any. Here we go. Okay, there's one other picture I want to show you guys. The Microtech Yeti. Meet the Microtech bear. This is another species that is talked about. It's a cross between like a gorilla and a bear. It's on Microtech. We don't have a lot of information about it, but we do know this is actual concept art for it. It was discussed as pretty recently, actually. So, yeah. The way that CIG was talking about predators, they seem to be very interested in bringing in the first 3, maybe 4 species they were looking about. The first species they wanted to bring in was an aggressive predator, and it was going to be this and the Pyro crab were the 2 ones they wanted to bring in. So I wouldn't be surprised if both of these are in there day one. I also wouldn't be surprised if the first implementation of passive AI would be Quasi grazers and the blind oni crabs as well. So call it Big Fang. There we go. So yes, crabs. Yes, you missed it earlier. Let me show you the crabs. So there's a reason why people have been saying that they see the Pyro crab in that video. If you remember that thumbnail in that video, people said, "There's the Pyro crab." Here's why. This is a clip from that part that everyone said was the crab, and here is the Pyro crab from concept art, as you can see here. And remember, the Pyro crab can disguise itself to look like a rock. That's the interesting part. Makes you rethink the double dogs. So, yeah. Pretty cool stuff. That's pretty much what I wanted to cover for the...
They managed to convince the entire continent, if not the globe, that eating a foot of bread was somehow good for you.
But can it describe itself as a rock? That's a good question. Pyro crab. Vehicles in disguise. Can the Pyro rock fit in a Nomad? That's a good question. I know they already have Pyro crab, but I think that either the species related to the horseshoe crabs one day, considering they look kind of alien and have bright blue blood. Are horseshoe crabs the ones that have like the pincers which can like crush diamonds and is like multicolored? I think it's something else, I think. Hey, Westbrook, we're covering... So this is Office Hours, for those of you guys who've never seen this before. How Office Hours works is just kind of a discussion on Star Citizen. We talk a lot about Star Citizen lore. We talk about Star Citizen progress. We do a little bit of both. It's kind of like a casual hangout session to talk about these sorts of things. So
I think the rock driver will be a bit in shock for one day. Can it not turn over itself? That's a good question. Like the rock. Do their arms sometimes glitch straight up? Mantis shrimp, I think is what I was thinking. Mantis shrimp. But yeah, mantis shrimp is one of those things. Yeah. Thank you, Scurvy. Yeah, mantis shrimp. Crazy creatures. If there's one thing I'd like to see, behavior for mantis shrimp, for like pyro crabs to be, is to mimic it off of mantis shrimp. Coconut crabs are the ones with the big claw, right? Like the one big claw and the one tiny one that you just like smash coconuts open. Let me look up horseshoe crabs real quickly. Oh, they kind of look like mantises. They look like a mantis, but that's just their shell, and underneath it they've got like they're a crab. I didn't realize those were crabs. They have blue blood. Interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if you see something like this in the verse, for sure. No. Let me show you. Let me show you the coconut crab. Oh no. They do have one big crab, big claw, but coconut crabs are nasty. Here we go. You've probably seen this before. This is a coconut crab. They nasty. Are they actually lobsters? You tell us our real Pico behind me. You're not the boss of Pico. There's only 300 newtons. 300 newtons for its size, though. A croc is like 4 times its size. Only if you live. The only way you'd be fearing taking out the trash about coconut crabs is if you lived in a Polynesian island, in South Pacific. Because I think they're native to, like, the smaller Oceania islands out there. Maybe you can find them in Hawaii. I don't know. I know there's a couple people who watch us from Hawaii, but I've seen a couple really cool picos made by individual people. I want to train that bear thing into hauling my cargo, yeah. Oh, let me, it's probably, let me see what you typed. It's probably, you probably put a dot in between stuff. If you put a dot between stuff, it'll, I know a guy who made a cool people way better, dot A, you did, so. That's why it got caught. It said dot A. But yeah, cool, picos are cool. So farming will be a thing. How in depth do you think the gameplay will be? Will they be my dot bad? What do you think the gameplay will be? What have they mentioned? So last we heard,
you have to buy a dome to be able to plant stuff. My guess is you'll have to either buy a dome or build like a plant bed of some kind, depending on where you are. And the purpose of having farms is obviously to grow crops. And the purpose of growing crops is for production. So farming, this will go into a little bit of the parts of Star Citizen that are like 98% theoretical that CIG has talked about, and this is a good way of explaining like how gameplay design is a little deceptive to most players. So the idea behind farming was that farming and mining would make a similar combination. Whereas with mining, you're extracting resources. With farming, you're extracting resources for like limited resources. Farming, you're extracting renewable resources. But both of them can be then converted by refinery or by other means into products. And those products could be sold as commodities. Or you could take those commodities and use them as the basis for other products you can build, essentially creating crafting. Now, crafting was originally the idea of building things or manipulating things to change things into better things. So, for instance, taking a shield generator and messing with it a little bit to create a shield generator that's unique, but has some limitations. It is incredibly strong, but requires a ton of power, and if it goes down, will be impossible to load back up, or will take, hours for it to recharge. That kind of thing. Special unique things that will be done through crafting. They didn't really decide how that was going to be done. That was just kind of a theory crafting. But when it comes to things like farming's concept was you would take the ingredients and then you would use them, refine them into other products, either food or something that goes into another, product used in the verse or commodity that's used in the verse from those farming situations. So that's kind of how that works. Now, the problem is that a lot of these, and this is what CIG has talked about, the problem is that a lot of these ideas that I mentioned are ideas. These are planned ideas that are coming out, but there's a lot of different ideas they've come out with, and based off of what they plan will help you understand what they're developing, but they won't know if two things. First of all, they won't know if it's fun for them to do it in the first place, if it's worth it until they start working on the tools for it. And then, secondly, they have to figure out can they even do it? Well, first off, they say, can they do it? Second of all, is it fun? Third of all, how does it fit into the entire universe? How will it fit and feed into other aspects of gameplay to make it meaningful rather than just a gimmick, Yeah, I think the way that CIG wants to make, like the way that they're pushing things like settlements, I would assume that, and, refining eventually, for players, I would assume that they're likely going to be pushing, their idea is that they think that there's going to be a large portion of the player base who will build a settlement and never leave that settlement. That they will build their full universe, their whole world on a planet or moon somewhere, in either civilized or uncivilized space. A home away from home kind of thing. And that they will be focusing on these production blocks. The thing that CIG is really trying to do, though, is they're trying to make the production blocks work without breaking the other loops. So essentially, if you're a farmer, they don't want you to be able to place a farm down, grind up to get the farm working, farm, harvest, and refine materials, and sell them without having to leave your home. They want you to either have invested a lot of time and energy into having all of those things in one place, like a farm, and then the things that you can do to refine those crops into products. That they want you to make that a chore, something you have to do. And but they also don't want to break the economy, because they don't want players to have a one-stop ability to do whatever they want. A good example of this is refining. When people complain about, oh, it can take up to a day to refine stuff, that's intentional. Because you can refine stuff and then come back the next day, or 3 days later, or whenever it's done, in the future at least, to get your refined materials and then sell them. In the meantime, you can still go off and mine while those things are being refined. That's a good example of what they want you to do. They don't want players to be able to mine, refine, sell, or build and then sell materials in a day. They're going to intentionally slow you down, because they want players to have to take time to make the game fun. They also want to discourage players from mono-boating materials, taking a material from its raw resources to its completion. The monopoly, I'll coin a term, monopoly of, it's definitely going to be monopoly in it. Vertical integration, monopolistic vertical integration of gameplay. There we go. Monopolistic vertical integration. That's a good way of putting it. This is a good technical term for it. They want to avoid monopolistic vertical integration or vertical gameplay. Monopolistic vertical gameplay. Thank you. There we go. Just real-time brain smoking. Essentially, they don't want you to be able to take a product from raw resource to market with in one step. And if you do, you need to have large groups of people to do it efficiently. And you can do it on your own, but anyone who's tried to make their own clothes knows that making your own clothes is complicated. But trying to make your own clothes by growing the flax or the cotton and then refining the cotton, then spinning the cotton into string, and then using the string or weaving the cotton into fabric, and then sewing it all together. Essentially, yeah, that's a lot harder to do. And so it's also not as fun. And I think CIG knows this, because that's one of the things I've noticed in survival games, is that a lot of the fun of gameplay can be sucked out of a game if you can do everything all at once. And if it just takes you, I'll build a base with this crafting bench and this crafting bench and this crafting bench and this crafting bench, and in a week I have the best armor and weapons in the game. And if I have enough people, I can, 5 or 6 people working around the clock, we can just dominate a server because we've got all the best gear. That kind of survival mentality, that kind of gameplay. I hate it. And to a degree, I feel like CIG is somewhere along that lines as well, because they want to hit the brakes on that kind of gameplay. They want to slow you down. They want to make you hit road bumps if you've been destroyed and those kind of things. And they want players to specialize. They want to force players to specializations. You're a cargo hauler, you're a combat pilot, something like that, so that players have to really focus down on that one profession to become good at it. Because if they want to become generalists, then they shouldn't be making as much money. When you have monopolistic vertical gameplay, taking products or taking gameplay loops from the very beginning to the end without with one player doing the whole steps, it becomes boring. It becomes repetitive. It sucks a lot of the gameplay loops out of there. Does that make sense? The only issue with refining time is how it affects hiring crew and escorts. When multi-crew comes on, you'll have to pay your help before you know how much you're making on the job. That's a risk. That's one of those risks for multi-crew, and that's kind of how it works now. If you're doing wildcat exploration, and that's one of the risks of doing business on your own. Whereas by the time you have multi-crew integrated and that kind of stuff, a lot of the stuff you'll get is missions. A refinery needs this many resources. The Shubin will go send you out to go mine these resources for them and then bring them back to a collection point. You don't make as much money, but you have guaranteed money, so you know how much money you can pay for your crew. But you still have to go find those resources. So that's where you weigh in the risk reward, meaningful gameplay. Do you hire a crew and escorts for this trade mission, not knowing how much money you'll necessarily make, or only having a vague idea and taking the risk because you could lose it all? Or do you take a mission from the Haulers Guild, from say the Rust Society, to haul a bunch of stuff from one place to another? You're only getting half of the profits you would have gotten on your own, but you're guaranteed money at the end. If you complete the mission, you're guaranteed money, which means you can pay your escorts and such. So, do you do a mixture of those two? That's where that discussion, where that meaningful discussion happens. And if you can just do everything at once, if you don't have to worry about any of that stuff, because you can do it all on your own, or you can just buy NPCs to do it for you, you start to see the soloing the Idris problem. That's part of that monopolistic vertical gameplay that I was talking about earlier. You don't want players to be able to do everything, because then it just removes the risk reward and the meaningful decisions. So, and in the meantime, you can also always just sell the ore. You don't have to refine it. You can sell it and still make some profit. So, I wish I could haul my friends a refined product in the market for them. I know one day it's coming, but still. Yeah, that's the plan. Eventually is you can just basically give it to your friend and they can haul it to market or sell it to them. So, yeah, it's a sim and it needs to be fun. And so they're going to have some realistic and unrealistic things. Like the idea that it takes a day. Remember, it doesn't take a day for all products to refine. It just takes some most valuable products. Those will take a longer time to refine, which again makes sense because rarity is a thing in economics. For those of you guys who don't know how economics works, one of the reasons we have value in economics, it's not always the case, but a lot of things that are valuable have to do with its scarcity or scarcity. I think some people actually, it's a definition, the way they actually say it, because of hard C's. But scarcity as a concept is present all throughout nature, throughout the world. It's what gives money and objects value, usually in terms of monetary reasons. So the thing about scarcity is the other thing that gives things value are things like in time investments. So something that takes a long time to refine, that has a lot of high utility for the market. I'm not going to explain utility. It's complicated. Will probably have a higher value because it takes longer, because you have to invest time in it. No one's going to want to use it unless it has value at the end of everything, unless it has some utility at the end. And obviously, CIG wants to parallel a lot of that ideas by saying the stuff that's going to make you the most money requires the most time or effort to get out. So time versus money is a big deal. What people in Star Citizen are already doing is looking for efficiency rather than money. Because if you can be efficient in earning money, a certain amount of money over a shorter period of time that you can repeat, then you can make more money off of those smaller products than you can making big bucks off of major products, major hauls and stuff like that. And that's kind of the thing that you'll have to balance. A lot of what I just talked about isn't in the game, guys. A lot of this stuff is just concepts that CIG came up with, in some cases 6, 7, 8 years ago, that they have yet to even reach that point, because they have to get all of the other solid building blocks on top of that to make, or the tools to be able to then get there. So a lot of what I said, this all started because someone asked a question about farming, but everything I talked about feeds into that. And that's how complicated these things can get. And if you don't think about it or overthink about it like you should in terms of building these kind of economic concepts, that, especially in a video game where fun is also supposed to be a factor, then you are setting yourself up for a market that's going to collapse or a game that sucks. So Yeah, every system is going to be very complex. But the way you make a complex system isn't by making an overly complicated system. You make a simple system that builds on top of it. It's easier to design, less weak points, so you don't have one person being able to collapse an economy because they know a loophole. Complex systems are complicated. Yeah, well, I think all money should be free, man. I agree, man. I don't think CIG is also not going to allow you to be able to hire AI to fly ships. I think what CIG said is that you'll be able to hire AI to crew ships, and I believe you can hire AI as escorts, but they will have their own ships. I think that's what CIG is making the cutoff for, is they won't allow AI players to hire AI to fly ships for them, kind of thing. Freudian. I don't know if I said Freudian slip or not, but... Oh yeah, no, Bixby. It'd be difficult to form a monopoly with 100 different systems. What I mean is gameplay monopoly. The idea, and when I say vertical integration in terms of business is being able to control a product from when it's extracted from the earth all the way, or a resource that you gather, you collect the resources, the natural resources, all the way through its production cycle to sale. Basically owning the mine or the farm, owning the factories that actually produce the product, owning the roads or owning the transportation to get through between all of those things, and owning the stores that you sell the products at. That, dirt to shelf stuff is called vertical integration. It's also known as monopoly, and they're terrible for economies. So, well, not necessarily. They're bad for market economies when they're controlled by private firms rather than public firms. There are some arguments that public firm monopolies can work a little bit better because in the end they're able to help monitor the prices. So things like the USPS can keep prices for sending packages and letters low because they can set the prices at whatever they want to, and still they don't have to worry about making a profit. So thus forcing competition to keep prices lower because they have to stay competitive with the other markets, the other things in the market. But there's some arguments against it too. Yeah, they want to prevent a standard oil. They also want to prevent a standard oil in terms of gameplay. So you want making it very hard for players to be one player to be the dirt to shelf producer without making it incredibly complicated and hard. Whereas with most survival games, I used this example earlier, where you can go from a rock and some trees to AK-47s and power armor with 5 dudes in a week. Because you just need the right resources, and it becomes the resources are the bottleneck, not the technology. CIG doesn't want the resources to be the bottleneck. They want the actual tech to be the bottleneck. They want to make it so that they want to hit the brakes on a lot of that speed progression. So you don't have Test building a city on Hurston and then being able to outproduce and outcompete Hurston in a week. Kind of thing. How is RSI not being bought out? Is it because Amazon actually owns them? What do you mean? CIG is privately owned. That's why they're not bought out. It would require Chris Roberts to be able to want to sell them. It's not a publicly traded company. Yeah. I mean, it is something we would do. That's 100% something we do. We would set up Montoyaville on the other side of Hurston and produce nothing but auroras that we would then smash into all the ships leaving Lorville, demanding that everyone who's going to trade in all their goods must come to Montoyaville. Though the only currency we take is beer. Every other game would allow it. Yeah, well, I mean, CIG wants to temper it. Has many beers, yes. So no AI commuter traffic or commercial flights. That's planned, Macker, at some point. But that's the thing, is that like AI will control them, but players won't control those AI. You won't have AI player. You won't have like a player run Starliner Enterprise where you're scheduling flights and AIs are taking AI and other players from places to places because you ordered this. This isn't Space Airliner or Spaceliner Tycoon. You're not going to have something like that going on, which is what they want to try to do this. Happy New Year to you too there, Failure. How you doing, buddy? Hail Brixieland, yes. Planet covered in auroras, yeah. Yeah, that Satisfactory is a good example. Like, CIG doesn't want to allow players to have a satisfactory situation where you're building a factory that can produce anything from bottom to top. But they do want to recreate that experience, but slower for an online purposes. I mean, how's it going, Meyer? Can we get a follow command for FTR and Meyer? Happy New Year to all of y'all. God, has it already been 2 hours? I haven't even talked about the progress tracker yet. It's good. We'll go over it real quickly. God, don't get me on economics tirades, guys. I'll go into too much detail. Yeah, for those of you guys who are just coming in, you missed. We talked a little bit about the animals of the verse. We talked about the Ranta, the Pyro crab, the Microtech yeti, the Quasi grazer. We didn't talk about the space whales. Not because I didn't want to talk, or not because there's not information about them, but because there's really the information that's there is very sketchy at best. We don't have they have the least amount of information about them. Is those guys? No, I may just have been in the wrong places looking for them. All right, so I'm not going to go over these in depth, but I will go through some of the big stuff that people ask about. So if you haven't gone over the progress tracker, you should. Here's the progress tracker. It's pretty cool. It's created by Jake Acapella, so anything that's wrong or you have problems with, blame Jake. So that thing you want is going to take longer than you wanted, blame Jake. So this is some of the cool stuff I'd like to see. So space mine / bombs. Oh, wait. This is one of those weird bugs that happens where every so often because you change the sizing, it changes to the dates. Vehicle concept art, no one cares. Not that no one cares, just The fuck am I listening to? There you go. So this is planned to finish, like for instance, this is a good example of how to look at the progress tracker. Players will have the ability to drop powerful bombs over targets in atmosphere from ships in space. Players in certain ships will gain the ability to release space mines in a coordinated fashion in an attempt to trap and capture. Okay, so that's space mines and bombs, right? That's supposed to be done by the end of 313, the first Q1. You will not see it anywhere on this progress list. It might be incorporated into something like the missile operator mode, but there's nothing that mentions it in here, which tells me that I wouldn't expect it in 313. But it's also one part of a larger system. So that's a great way of looking at the progress tracker. And anything you look at the progress tracker is one part of one feature that may have multiple parts for that feature. Reputation UI. There's an entire reputation into the important NPCs. This may be combined with a bunch of other stuff dealing with like mobiGlas and such. Building block shop conversion. That's being worked on, but by design, but then engineering is working on it well into Q3 2021. Commodity kiosk, again, work well into Q22, which is, converting the commodity kiosk to utilize building blocks. This will also add loading timers, which will need to be factored into planning cargo runs. So like loading time and unloading time is being added this year. We know that's going to be worked on. It's a big issue. Cargo system refactor. Refactor allowed for both found and purchased cargo to be picked up and moved around and placed in community. That's another part, big part. iCache conversion for gameplay systems. It's just the UP Play gameplay systems coming in that year as well. Dynamic events, something that's going on for 46 weeks, going into the end of the year. Mission Manager app. So these are all good examples. This is all part of just the UI. A lot of this stuff is just the UI and how it ties into the background systems. So a good way of looking at this is we talked about the animals, right? So let's look at Planet Content Team. Maybe it's in here. They have harvestables and minables. That's going to be going in the entire year. Oh, let's see. They've got Nix. These are all being produced at the same time. The Nix 3 is taking the least amount of time. Pyro system setup. There's a couple unannounced stuff. These might be just art. Yeah, it's art, so I don't know. Unannounced content, unannounced planetary systems. There's an unannounced planetary system in there. That doesn't mean that we will see a new planet system in game by the end of the year. It just means that they're working on it. Live mission content team. Nothing really here. Yeah, so I'm not seeing anything in here specifically about that, but it could be part of the team that the teams that haven't introduced their content, which is supposed to be coming in at the beginning of next year. So, I wouldn't be surprised if you got your Ares and your. Let's take a look at the vehicles. CIG tends to work on ships in chunks, and when they get one type of ship done, they like to just throw out a lot of that ship. See Origin, they released the 300i rework, then they did the 890 and the 100 pretty fastly after that, and the M2 and the C2 are coming out next year, hopefully. So yeah, we've got the M2 and the C2 on here. The Nova Tonk. And I want to say the A2 is on here as well. For Q3. And I wanted to say there was a Crusader. Ares was on here as well. Was the road system CIG? Engine swap. Yeah, A2. M2 are both in there. Ares. Here we go. Yeah, this Ares is scheduled to be worked on this year.
So who knows? Die of COVID. Yeah. Starliner's a myth. It's never coming out. I love it. I love the Starliner, but it's one of those gameplay loops that ain't coming out. That ain't coming out until I can get my pension. The reason why it's in both, and let me show you, is because the C2 is designed for vehicle content, right? But for the US team, for the C2, it's tech content. You see that? So, building, implementing, and balancing the Crusader Hercules C2 as a flight-ready vehicle versus... Oh, it's the same thing, but it's design versus tech. So you've got a designer in the EU designing the vehicle, and then a person in the US taking that and implementing the tech for it. I'm guessing things like the doors opening and closing, being able to boot up the UI, that kind of thing, and possibly things like the A2 bombs. A bomb bay is unique. Well, that makes sense as well. Why would the tech be done a week before? Because not everything in the ship needs to be working. A set of doors can be copy pasted all over the ship. The UI for a HUD can be done pretty quickly once you have it done or already have it set up. The animations for things like being able to get in and out of seats and the seats moving and such, not that complicated in comparison. The design of the ship may not be done in terms of like the layout, where the positions of things are, how the size of the ships, in terms of like the specific sizes, the component placements. You can have the tech done, but you don't have the design done. They're a long way off, yeah. Corsair, yeah. Ruin Station, late in the year, yeah. I wouldn't like. Here's a good example of that. Let's look at LZ1 content team. Pyro space stations and Ruin Station. They're supposed to be done by the end of the year. However, I wouldn't expect Pyro by the end of the year. Why? Just because they have the system working and they have aspects of the system that are working in terms of the gameplay features, if they don't have the way of connecting the two systems through a jump point in some meaningful way, you're not going to see it in the game. So, essentially, the way that I'll talk about the progress tracker is when you're looking at the progress tracker, look at it in pieces, and you can see how each individual pieces will line up. Don't see it as done, but see it as where CIG is planning to work on, or what their current goals are for the year. And these things will change every so often as you see that. I hope we can fit the Talon in the Starlight Lifter. Maybe. Depends on its comparison to the Tonk, because that's what it's designed to lift, is the Tonk. So. We know Squadron 42 will be a story about the war with the Vandul. Sooner or later, Nyx may be needed for Squadron 42. Maybe. If anything, smaller portion is that very linear, might be in Vega or something. Yeah. I will say this. For those of you guys in the YouTube chat talking about Squad 42, I will not comment on it because I know the actual answer. Because I know the story almost entirely of Squadron 42. So I will say no comment. Yeah, you might be able to fit Talon. It really depends on that kind of stuff. Because the issue is sits it fits. It's cat rules for ships. So being able to fit a vehicle into the cargo bay
is not just being able to put it in there. It may have enough internal cargo space for a Talon, but is the entrances large enough or shaped properly for you to be able to wiggle a Talon into there? That's the question. That's the major question. For instance, the width of a Freelancer Max is large enough to be able to hold an Ursa, just barely, but its height is too small. However, the internal cargo space of it could fit an Ursa. You could physically put an Ursa inside a Max, but you couldn't get it in there because the entranceway is too messy. It's the way a lot of ships go. It's about how you enter and exit, infiltrate and exfiltrate from the cargo bays that will matter in terms of what you can put in there. Can fit weedless, maybe. Later, Adam. Thanks for hanging out, man. All right, y'all. I've been going for 2 hours, and it felt like 30 minutes. Happy New Year, guys. We'll be back tomorrow bright and early. So it's going to be, based off my calculations, it will be 11 a.m. my time, when the proper time frame happens on Microtech. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to do the first ever Traveler's Day celebration in the verse. So for those who don't know what Traveler's Day is, watch my latest video, please. But the quick and dirty is Traveler's Day is a holiday where at the beginning of the first rotation of the first orbit of a planet, the first day of a new orbit of a planet, you gather together at one location at dusk, and then you travel all night or until you reach a destination. And once you reach that destination, that's the end of the journey. It's all about the journey and experiencing a journey. Hence Traveler's Day. So we're going to celebrate Traveler's Day on Microtech tomorrow because it's technically the new rotation of Here on Sol, even though it's not really on Microtech. So, but what we'll do there is we'll try to fix it. I've tried to line it up almost exactly with a rotation and make it at a time where most people are accessible. Now, I know a lot of you are going to get absolutely schnockered or are already absolutely schnockered right now. So I know it's going to be a little rough, but it should happen. The actual event should happen directly at about 11 a.m. my time, which is noon Eastern. But I'm going to set up about 2 hours ahead of time. So if you want to join us, come back to this channel at both YouTube and Twitch at 9 a.m. Central. So that's 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. So in about 12 hours. And we'll be doing some setups, and then we'll go straight from the setup to... we'll go from setups and kind of gathering people together. And then we will... go as a group. Make sure you have an Ursa. That's the important part, is having an Ursa, because we're going to be traveling in Ursas. Anything else will kill you. Ursas, and if you have Reds or Carracks with respawn beds, make sure you get those as well. Yes, 7 a.m. PST. Now, we won't actually start at 7 a.m., but 7 a.m. will be the setup portion of it. So make sure you guys come back here. I'll make a stream for that as well for YouTube, so you guys can join us as well on this. Don't use a Cyclone. Don't use any hover bikes. They blow up within a couple of hits. The only thing that can take the hits and not explode is an Ursa, because of some bugs that are happening in the game right now. So the Ursa, the journey is too long to walk, and the Ursa is the best option. So Happy New Year, Feliz Navidad, so on and so forth. I will see you guys tomorrow for a Traveler's Day celebration. And like I say, everyone, hope to see you guys again soon. Hope I say every time, hope to see you guys again soon. But if I don't, hope to see you someday in the black. And remember, ex Historia ad Astra.